I'll Monis take some time to get connected. I am quickly going to go ahead and do the honors of introducing him. So, as I already said, if anyone is interested in the digital entrepreneurial space in Pakistan, they would already know about our guest speaker. But Mr. Rahman is the co-founder and executive chairman of Naseeb Networks Inc., business-oriented social network used primarily for online job recruiting. Rosie PK is a hint for everyone here. Forbes named him number 6 on its top list of 10 big hitting Asian businessmen under 50. He is also an active member of the advisory board for Acumen, a not-for-profit organization that raises charitable donations to invest in companies, leaders, and ideas that are changing the way the world tackles poverty. And most recently, which I am also personally super interested in learning about today, he's launched his initiative Dukan to support people during COVID-19. So without further ado, Mr. Monis Rahman, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk to this group of people. Had great interaction last year when we also were doing this. So we can take this a few ways. I'd love to talk about some of the things we're doing and how they link into the social space. And if you'd like to make this interactive and ask questions, that's fine too. So from my end, the format's completely open. The goal is to share with you what's going on, what can be done, and how we're doing it. So with that, I'll just start, but feel free to interrupt me and steer the conversation in a direction that you find interesting. So, to start off, I've been working as an internet entrepreneur here in Pakistan since 2003. And when I came in 2003 back to Pakistan from the US, there were about 1.8 million internet users who were largely connected through fixed broadband, through their offices, DSL connections. And today we have 100 million broadband mobile smartphone users in Pakistan, which is about 70% of all adults now in Pakistan have access to interactive smartphones and can use them for something, WhatsApp or Facebook or you name it. So there's been a massive change. And as we rode through this massive change, I started a jobs platform called Rosie.pk, which is the largest jobs platform in the country. And Rosie.pk has 9.8 million professionals on it. It has 65,000 employers. We've helped over 1 million people find jobs. And while that's been rewarding, that has happened mainly at the top of the pyramid. These are college-educated individuals with a bachelor's degree, largely, predominantly. So what's happened? What's changed? Smartphones have changed. Not only have smartphones changed, but broadband globally has changed in emerging areas of the world, ranging from continents like Africa. You've seen what's happening in Indonesia. It's quite amazing. We're following what's happening in those areas of the world, and we've seen the change that's been made. And this change that's been made has actually disproportionately helped people at the bottom, because all of a sudden they've gotten new devices, new use cases, new ways of doing things that solve major problems, such as having to go to a bank branch. If you're a woman in a village, doing a financial transaction is not easy. Because one, you don't have transportation, because you're not allowed to ride a motorcycle, because you have to straddle this bike, which is viewed as, immoral. And the males in your household often don't even allow you to own a smartphone because they're afraid that you might chat with somebody and meet somebody and marry people outside the family, what is seen as acceptable. So we have undue constraints already. But the advent and the social acceptance of smartphones and internet has allowed a poor person to do transactions, to get his wage, to make payments without having to walk 5 miles or ride a motorcycle across and spend 100 rupees in fuel to the neighboring area in order to do a transaction, in order to get his money, his wage. So with all of this in mind, we started a few experiments, and I'll start with the first experiment that's changed everything for me. So I think my life and my worldview has dramatically changed in the last 12 months or so. So I'll rewind back a little over a year ago today. What happened? a little over a year ago today, COVID hit in a big way in Pakistan, and we had lockdown. And during lockdown, we had to close all of our offices. And not only did we have to close our offices, we almost had to close Rosie, our company. And the reason was that employers stopped hiring. And the employers who were hiring through us stopped paying us because they could no longer afford it, because the economic cycle had sort of contracted so much that they weren't being paid. So they stopped making onwards payments. And this is a story that happened globally, but it hit us particularly hard because Rosie, as a jobs platform, is in the business of helping organizations hire, and that predominantly happens when they're growing. No one was growing. So while we were idle for a couple of months at home, I started to visit the market near my house. And when I visited that market, the shopkeepers were fairly distressed, and they were distressed because they weren't able to sell online. They had no way to sell online, and people weren't able to physically come and buy things for them. So they all said, I wish we could sell online. We're seeing this trend, Food Panda and Daraz and e-commerce. We don't know how to do it. We don't have IT teams. We don't understand marketing. We're not even educated. We can't understand English. How can we be a part of this? Yes, I have a smartphone. Also during COVID, what happened was I had to go get masks from a friend's house. So even though it was lockdown, I broke the lockdown because I wanted to get masks, and I drove, and I saw in one of the markets here, there were about 25 workers, laborers on the side of the road with the shovels and axles and tools, just sitting patiently. No one else was around, just these 20 people, completely empty. And I was curious, what are these guys doing here? It's lockdown. There's nobody else here. And I asked them, what are you doing? And they said, we're waiting for work. We haven't eaten in 3 days. They hadn't eaten in I could see it on their face. They hadn't eaten in 3 days. Out of desperation, they were sitting there on that sidewalk, hoping somebody would come and say, hey, I've got some work. Here's 100 rupees. Here's a few hundred rupees. These are the people who used to earn in the day. Whatever they earn in the day, they would spend at milk, food at night, next day, and the cycle would continue. There's no savings here. And so it broke my heart. And I went back home, and I talked to my wife, and I said, we have food. We have lots of food in our house. We don't have a food issue. These people have an existence issue right now, livelihood. So we opened our safe. We had a small amount of cash in there. I took all the cash we could find. We went to main market, started to hand out 1,000 rupee notes to everybody. So 20 people, I said, make a line. And they lined up and started giving like 1,000 rupee notes next person. Pretty soon, those 25 people turned into 80, turned into 150. And the next thing I knew, we had about 350 people, a crowd of 350 people surrounding me and my wife. And we had cash in our hands, and we're trying to hand it out as fast as we can to people so they could eat. And so pretty soon, it was a mob scene. People's hands were coming up, they're pushing, shoving, we were getting crushed. I didn't know if I had already paid this person or if his hand came a second time, and what was going on, and the politics started amongst them. I said, this is not scalable. We are in danger right now. So we managed to escape by making our way out of the crowd back into the car. We were chased actually for about an hour by people who were they needed help and money. And I told my wife, this is not scalable. This is not a practical way of handing out cash to people who need it. And we brainstormed lots of ideas. We said, well, we can give them food instead of cash and all of that kind of stuff. And the physical distribution is always a pain, because whenever you do it, if any of you have had experience when you go and hand out even flour or blankets, the same thing happens. A mob scene ensues, and it's not equitable. The strongest person or the most aggressive person gets the most. Like a widow in her house in the village won't end up with anything because she's not strong enough to make it through the crowd. So I came to the conclusion that there were two things that were important. And one was, I shouldn't decide what this person needs. This is a person struggling for their life. When you're struggling for your life, you know what you need. You know if the thing you need right now is milk or bread for your child, or if you have to pay your rent or a portion of your rent because you're going to be kicked out, and that's a bigger problem than going and acquiring a bag of rice, which we're, with our great intentions, handing them rice. And they, oh, thank you for your rice, but I'm about to get evicted, and I've got 3 kids. So it was sort of presumptuous for us to decide what to give them. They need cash, let them do whatever they want with that. So that was the first conclusion. The second conclusion was, that distribution had to be more equitable, and it had to remove the physical barriers, which is expensive. It takes time. It's inefficient. It doesn't scale. And around that time, I had built a bunch of things. We had built job platforms. We had built financial platforms. I also run a fintech called Finja, which is an EMI, and Finja gives unsecured loans to grocery stores and SMEs, and has all of the rails for the payments connected to the banking system. I had run other platforms like Easy Tickets through e-commerce, etc. So very quickly during lockdown, sat down with a piece of paper and started sketching screens. And what we ended up doing, it was 5 people in the office, we're doing it after hours. We built this app called Rosie Dost, which means Rosie friend, a friend. And it was basically an agent app that let anybody that we authorized collect information on unemployed workers. So we managed to get 50 volunteers in the villages, not the villages, the abadis, where these individuals live, the colonies of workers. And we recruited them. We said, we're going to give these people donations. But every time we give a person a donation that you onboarded, you'll get 100 rupees. And this is a time when people were unemployed. They had no livelihood. So the smarter, more educated, or more savvy with smartphones, more activist-minded people stepped forward, and we got 50 of them, and we said, here's our app. And the app was built with a lot of AI that we had learned over our years of experience on the fintech side. So we took pictures of ID cards. We did a verification with Nagra. So we extracted the ID card information and we shot it through an API to Nagra, which is the authority to verify identities. We took face pictures to match AI on the ID card. We took GPS locations. We asked them questions about when they were last employed, when they last drew a salary, how much of a salary they normally drew, what are their household expenses, do they rent, do they own, what's the family size, how many kids, how many people in the family earn aside from them, what's the total income. So we did this very quick and dirty scoring platform, and we had ways to recheck it. GPS, fairly authentic information from people inside the communities. And in a matter of a month and a half, we onboarded about 12,000 households, which constitute roughly about 50, 60,000 people. And the moment that happened, we had really reliable quality data. And we were asking them questions on if they own smartphones and if they use internet and 3G and what they do. And this is where the other insight came from, which I'll talk about later, that these people are much more internet savvy over the last few years than we expected. And then what we did was we built a crowdfunding platform called projectpakistan.org. I think it's still on the net, although we aren't doing anything much with it now. And we invited our friends and family and people overseas and inside the country to donate money. They could put in a credit card, a PayPal account. And we raised about $120,000 in that month and a half from just well-wishers, 5,000 rupees, 10,000, 3,000, 50,000 rupees, whoever wanted to be a part of it. And when you donated, you would actually see the individuals with videos of them speaking, because our agents were onboarding with all of their information, household information, that the money would go to. And the moment you donated, our servers automatically shot money to their ID cards to EasyPasa agents and sent them SMSs. So we actually dispersed money to about 12,000 households, 60,000 people in a matter of a month and a half, completely through these rails, through our servers, 5 people. And they started to go to these EasyPasa agents, and they would say, I got an SMS, I've got some money, and they would show it, and the EasyPasa agent would have them 1,000 rupees. So now we're able to spray money across fairly efficiently, and then we used to call them and check, and it's probably the most rewarding thing in my career when you call somebody and say, did you manage to go and get the money? And they start crying, and they tell you their problems, and they tell you, my husband died, I'm working, I have 3 daughters, we don't have any income, we don't have anything to eat, and and it just breaks your heart to hear these stories. And then we went and started to meet a few of these people to actually understand what was going on. Phenomenal experience, changed my worldview quite a bit. Learned a lot about this bottom of, the pyramid, and how many stratas and layers and nuances there are in what we think of as poor. Poverty for us is just, one thing. These are poor people. But when you go in there, you figure out how many layers and how complicated it is, and how many social stratas exist within that. So fast forwarding a little bit, this moved on to when COVID started to end and things started to uplift, and people started to move around and start to get reemployed. And then our goal became, okay, no more donations. Donations were needed. I'm not a big fan of giving out money. I'm a bigger fan of giving out a means for people to be self-sufficient. It's more sustainable. There's more dignity in it. It's more productive. So we said, now let's get these people into jobs. And my experience had been in the job sector with Rosie, with our white-collar jobs. And it seemed impossible ever to build a platform to enable these people to get jobs because their skills aren't quantified. They're not interactive. How do you match them? How do you get them to apply? And, they don't speak English. They're not educated. And they can't even articulate what they do at times. So taking that data and that experience, we built a platform called rozgar.pk, and I urge you to see it. We're very proud of it, rozgar.pk. And we ran it as a pilot project. We onboarded about 40,000 workers on that. They self-onboarded, by the way. So one of the things we learned is, when we put these agents in the field and they're onboarding, yes, we get traction. But we get more traction when people self-onboard because they have smartphones, and there are 100 million people now in Pakistan who have smartphones. And out of those 100 million, 50 million came on board in the last 5 years. So if you can just fathom 50 million people, first time on the internet is through a mobile device. And it happened in the last 5 years. It's the first time they discovered this world that we are so used to and that we've grown up with. And these are people who are barely educated, 5th grade pass, Urdu, they can't speak English. So we built this interface on rozgar.pk, audio-based. We put a lot of voice notes in there, and we let people self-onboard. They said, I'm a cook, I'm a maid, I'm a painter, I'm a carpenter, I'm a locksmith. And we started to get these beautiful profiles where they put videos of themselves explaining what they do, explaining where they live. We took the GPS, and now we started matching them. So anybody can go onto Rozgar and post a job. You need a driver, you need a cook, you need somebody. Post your job. You have to leave a voice note so they can understand what you're saying, and they can see the area and if it's near them, because proximity is important to them. And once they do that, they just click a button in their browser. It's a browser-based app, by the way, because we discovered that a lot of them had very cheap, low-end smartphones. So it's very hard for them to install new apps, and their phones crash. They don't have enough RAM and memory, whatever. So we built an app inside a browser, which anybody can open because they all have a browser on their phone. And now they started to call. They click a button, a call is made. You say, yeah, you had a job for a driver. I'm a driver. And connections started to be made, and people started to invite them for interviews, and placements started to happen. We ourselves hired 6 people through that platform. And now we've learned a lot. We're starting to scale that platform, and it's so rewarding. It's impossible to imagine that something like this could even ever happen. If you asked me 5 years ago, I'd say impossible. It can't happen. But it can happen now in Pakistan because the landscape has changed. As we build these new use cases for them, what we're seeing is that these people are becoming more savvy. These are the same people who are riders for Food Panda or maybe Uber drivers. And they've gotten used to smartphones. Now they're using Rozgar, they're used to that. Now they're using other platforms. So the more use cases we build, the faster they get up the curve and can do more things. And on the back of this whole thing, Dukan was created, which is my latest startup, which I'm super, super excited about. It's called Dukan.pk, Dukan.pk. Also explore that. And Dukan came out of that first experience I mentioned. That first experience was, okay, while the workers are unemployed, we need to get them back into jobs. Actually, the shopkeepers, the SMEs, the MSMEs, the micro and small entrepreneurs are also hemorrhaging because their shops are closed, they can't sell, and they don't know how to do e-commerce. E-commerce in Pakistan, by the way, last year grew at 86%, among the fastest in the world. And it's growing very, very fast here. But we are excluding the bottom of the pyramid, or the majority of businesses. There are 5 million MSMEs in the country, the small, micro, people who sell from home, or people who have small shops, or people who are like in Swat and Hunza and make, handicrafts. So my experience back in the market, in the UK market, where they wanted to sell online, and the conversations, watching how they do their sales and business transactions, trying to understand their user behavior, because it was critical to make an interface that they could use. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. Aesop has a fable about about a crane that was invited for dinner, and the glass was flat, and the crane couldn't drink out of that glass because it has a long beak. And the crane invited the other chap over and had a glass that was very long, flask that only the beak could go into. Well, it's the same thing. When we design interfaces for people who are less educated and do not have the life experiences and the world views that we have, and don't watch shows on Netflix, their worldview is a different worldview than ours, which means that the way that they navigate a user interface is also a different way of doing that. So we learned early on that we have to build interfaces that this new group of 50 million newly emerged internet users at the bottom of the pyramid are able to use. So Dukan was launched, and the vision and the aim and goal of Dukan is to let anybody with a smartphone create an online store in Urdu, in English, drag and drop within 1 minute. And once they create that online store, anybody in the world can buy their products, because we take care of the integrations on the payment side, ecommerce, JazzCash, EasyPesa, IBFT. And we also take care of the issue on the other side, which was, how do I get delivery to my customers? So we did online integrations with Bikeia and Trax and e-commerce companies that do the delivery piece of them. So all you have to do is upload your products, and then we are now building interfaces for them in Urdu that they can market. So we're actually automating the whole Facebook advertising experience for them, the targeting. So the goal is to get these 5 million MSMEs online, able to sell, and we believe it'll make a significant dent in the economy. And the goal is also to turn this 2 million youth that are entering the job market every year with no hope of employment to become entrepreneurs. When I say no hope of employment, is because the amount that we could educate 200,000 to 300,000 people a year through our higher education institutes. What happens to the rest? How do they get jobs? So that, and even if they were educated, we don't have enough jobs in our economy to fuel them. So what happens to them? They become liabilities for you, where they're smart, intelligent, ambitious people with smartphones. So Dukan is giving them this platform, this app, where now they can go and become entrepreneurs, sell whatever you want. You can sell a service, you can sell products. And for those of you who live in Lahore, and I'm sure other areas of the world, you'll see this as well, your towns are split into basically two halves. In Lahore, for example, we've got this thing called the canal. It's like a body of water that splits the city into two. And on this side of the canal, you have the markets, the wholesalers, where we don't go to because they're hot and traffic and sweaty and small shops. On the right side, you've got the nice stores, the department stores, which are air conditioned and nice places to go. But the price difference between the west side of the canal and the east side is dramatic. That's the arbitrage opportunity, because people on the west side, these nice stores, go to the east side or vice versa, and they buy goods from there, and they have a markup. So if I'm buying something from Shalmi in Lahore, the wholesaler area, first it's going to take me about an hour to get there, right, because of traffic and walking inside. And if I buy an item for 20 rupees, it's sold on this side of the Nehar for 80 rupees. And I don't blink a minute, because 80 rupees is not a huge amount of money, but I could buy it for 20 rupees. So now you have the opportunity for any individual to go and sit over there in the wholesale market, wait for orders to come, grab the goods, and go and hand it to people who live on the other side. And they get fantastic deals and good qualities, and they don't have to leave their homes. And it rides on the rails that have already been laid in the country, the e-commerce rails, the payment rails, the smartphone rails. And the Pakistani consumer has gotten very, very used to e-commerce. I remember when I first moved back to Pakistan, and I used to go and speak at schools like LUMS and LSE and a few others, talking about 2005, 6, and I'd say, how many of you have ever bought anything online? Maybe one or two hands would go up. I'd say, why? It's not safe. It's not safe to use a card, and I don't even have a card. But even if I did, I wouldn't use it on the internet. It's not safe to shop online. Now, when I go to these schools and I talk, I said, how many have bought online? Every single hand goes up, because all of us are buying online, and we're buying online not just from the large, sites like Amazon and others, and here we have Daraz and a few other sites, but they're buying on platforms that they never heard of, because on their Facebook feeds now they're seeing this great shoe that looks cool, and it's by like a brand they've never heard of, but they like the shoe and they click it, and they exchange a WhatsApp with the owner, and they do a bank transfer. It's a very offline experience, but they're doing sales. And now everybody is buying things. I buy things every week. I'll buy a small item, and everybody in my office and my home and students are all buying. Now this trend is increasing fast. So this was the nature or the origin when we started with Dukan. And now we have, in about 4 months, about 70,000 shops that have been built on the platform. But where is this going? How do we make money? It's a business. And how we make money is we've decided not to charge a commission on their sales, because we think that's evil. You're squeezing into their margins and you're making them do acrobatics. And so we would rather help them grow. And as a consequence of their growth, we'd like to take a piece of that. And one of my startups, Finja, that I'm involved in, I'm a co-founder, we're giving unsecured loans to SMEs, and primarily the Kriana sector, grocery stores. And we've learned that business very well. We've learned how to score them based on how large their store is, square footage, how much inventory they have on the walls, what kind of footfall they have, how long they've been there. And the default rate on those loans is less than 1%. The problems with MSMEs is that they need credit in order to grow, because they're hand to mouth. They sell, and whatever they sell, they save a portion of the profits there, and they buy more inventory, and a portion they use to eat. And as a result, they can never really scale their inventory. They're always flat, but things get by. Now, if they could get credit, they could sell more. They have a demand for more. Stores often run out of inventory towards the end of the month. So how do we give credit to these MSMEs, which the banking formal sector has abandoned? And they have abandoned this sector because they are undocumented, and because I have no data to score whether they will repay my loan. So if they do come to me for a loan, I'll take their house papers and I'll say, now your house is mine until you repay my loan. I'll take their car papers or bike papers, and I'll take 3 months to process it, and I'll put them through the ringer. And guess what? I'm not even interested in those loans, because they're small, fragmented loan, a few $100s. And I, as a bank, can give my millions and millions of dollars to a government bond or to a savings product of the government. I make free money off that. Zero. I've become lazy as a bank. I have no appetite to give loans to MSMEs. So the other angle with Dukan is, once these small guys start to sell through our platform and we start to see their sales traction month over month, we can score them. And when we can digitally score them, we can digitally inject cash inside their app, very similar to how we handed out cash to about 60,000 people during lockdown. It doesn't even have to be through an agent. It can be directly through the app, through a wallet. So the lending opportunity, we believe, is phenomenal, and the kind of impact we think that lending opportunity will make is also phenomenal, because these SMEs are the backbone of the economy. When they purchase, that money trickles down to the wholesalers, suppliers, FMCG, everything. Everyone wins. So this was the Dukan model. I spoke to you about the Rozgar model, and I spoke to you about what started before that. These are the couple of things I'm doing. I can talk about entrepreneurship a lot and take you away from the social sector more towards the capitalist side of what I'm doing. But this organization I'm now inside, my Dukan office right now, we've raised VC investment. Finja has raised VC investment. We've also raised funding from Habib Bank, a bank, first time in Pakistan's history that a fintech has been invested into by a bank, a large bank, a commercial bank. We're very proud of that. And Rosie things, we've also raised funding for Rosie. Rosie was the first online startup in Pakistan to ever bring in VC funds. So there's a lot of traction going on there in terms of, capital as well. So I think I'll stop there. I'm seeing some questions, so let me get a chance to go back and figure out how to see those chats here. I'm in participants. This is
If you want, I've been noting everyone down and I can just
oh,
ask
that'd
them.
be great. Please, please. But if people want to ask their own questions, that's fine as well.
So I would suggest we start with Abdul Samud's question because I think it's a very interesting take that he had. Abdul Samud, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Monis Rahman, if I'm correct.
Yes, correct.
Awesome. So my question was primarily, I was reading through your background and I know that you've done a lot of stuff in entrepreneurship, and then you've also gotten funding from top guys, Silicon Valley guys. And this is something that is, becoming, very apparent in the startup ecosystem and for enterprises in recent time. However, my question to you is: do you think that social enterprises or social entrepreneurs get equal access to funding as much as typical startups? So think about it in terms of venture capital, private equity, and some other sources of funding. Because what we have seen in recent time is they only depend on grants. Do social entrepreneurs that have business models that are well grounded, do they get equal access to funding as much as typical startups? So that's my very first question. So my second question in that same vein is that how do we bridge the gap for financing, either debt or equity, for social entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I've been involved with Acumen Fund, which is a social investment fund. It is a venture fund, but it has a social angle. And there are lots of funds like that. There's Quona Capital, there's Axion. I could go on and on. So there's a whole ecosystem of socially oriented venture capital funds. All of them are interested in the venture or the project becoming, at the very least, self-sustainable and also able to generate a profit to grow their own operations. And I think that's very reasonable to expect, because you don't want a bottomless pit where you just keep throwing in money and doing good. And there are times for that too. But when you talk about building scalable models, it has to be self-perpetuating. It can't be that when the money runs out, the project is over. And for that, we'd like to urge all of our social entrepreneurs to think in terms of sustainability. And making a profit isn't evil. It can be really good, because if making a profit allows you to do more of what you're doing in an equitable way and higher quality, you are scaling the good that you're doing. So I firmly believe that turning social enterprises into profitable entities that are focused on impact, but nonetheless are profitable and can scale that profitability to do more, this is the most powerful way to make a difference. So yes, it's generally harder for a social enterprise without too much focus on profitability to raise funding. There are places to do that, but social enterprises that are making massive social impact and can generate revenue in equitable ways, I think they're very attractive. And I think that's a sweet spot. Like if you look at what I'm doing with Dukan, it is a for-profit business. We're attracting lots of interest from venture capital funds who are interested in a return on their investment, but we're also attracting lots of interest from the donor agencies as well, who are seeing this as a way to make impact. So I think it really depends on how you position it and how you strategize your growth. Capital is definitely available.
Thank you so much for making that point, because I definitely wanted the fellows to understand that profit is not bad. What you choose to do with that profit and what are the means of getting that profit are the conversations that we need to be having. Sarah, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Hi, Monis. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I have two questions. Number one is regarding Rozgar. So how difficult was it to aware the people of such a thing? And secondly, if Rozgar was founded before the pandemic, when daily wages per se were getting some sort of work anyway, would it have been able to cater to thousands of people?
Yeah, okay, so good question. Now, because we had worked on this donation platform for workers, we already had a latent pool, a sizable latent pool of people who needed jobs. So we were able to reach out to them very quickly through SMSs and WhatsApp and bring them back onto that platform. So it gave us a really good starting point. And if COVID hadn't happened, our ability to do that would have been severely restricted because the need was much graver. And the usability of these platforms or usability of online dramatically grew because people were desperate in order to communicate. They couldn't leave their houses. So through their smartphones, they turned on the internet and they started communicating with people, exchanging information. So COVID definitely helped accelerate the acceptance of online use cases at the bottom of the pyramid. And we had an accelerated head start because of the data we'd collected and the people we had engaged with and the goodwill we had created. But once we did that, that was the starting point. And then you have word of mouth kick in. And then we found that social networks like Facebook were surprisingly effective in reaching these people. And that was a big surprise. And so our onboarding actually was not difficult at all. It takes money and effort, but it actually happens. And now we're thinking of opening up little retail offices where people can go and find jobs. So I don't think that's a really hard problem to solve. Everybody needs jobs. The hard problem to solve is making the whole platform work end to end.
Yeah, thank you. And I have another question too. So the e-commerce boom in Pakistan is quite evident. Amazon approving of Pakistan reseller and all that. So do you not think it is a high time Pakistani entrepreneurs and like tech crews started something similar to Upwork, Fiverr, Guru.com?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We should have a local freelancing platform. And I've been working on this for a while. And we're talking to a number of potential, partners in this, but we need local freelance platforms. And we've started to build something and it's a massive opportunity. It needs to be done. The first one to do it is going to be a hero. Freelancing opportunities don't just exist internationally. We've long ignored our local market, which has now grown in size. So I think local freelancing opportunities are also quite abundant. And we don't have to compete with people who think that we're a dangerous, crazy, unstable place to work. We don't have that perception arbitrage as well. So absolutely they're needed.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Emma, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, sure. Hi, Monis. Thank you for your time and all the.
Ahmed, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your time. Can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Barely, but yes.
Okay. So I'll try to just ask my question. My question was, have you considered Akhuwat's interest-free loans project and model for your Finger project?
Yeah,
and if no, why?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So, first thing we did was we invented Islamic loans through a digital platform, the first time, I think, at least in Pakistan. So we worked with Mizan Bank and we automated the whole Islamic process to give loans. So I suppose you can call those interest-free loans because they are Islamic loans. And it was a tough journey because if you know how Islamic loans work, there needs to be an underlying asset behind it. So there are all of these APIs being called that are obtaining a bag of rice that's put in a warehouse someplace, against which you rent it back. So that stuff is happening. And then recently what we figured out is that the loans we're giving are very Islamic because these are productive loans. This is a partnership with the Kriana store. We invest with them, they buy product, they sell the product, and we share the profit from that. So the Finja native loans are now Islamic. So that's a big boon. So yes, we are very interested in these interest-free loans, and we've done a lot of work to do that, and we'll be hearing a lot more about that as well.
Okay, yes. That was my one question. Thank you.
But I want to talk about something because we're talking about interest-free, and let's talk a bit about that. In the social sector, there is a belief that profit is evil, that making money is evil, and we've talked a bit about that. And then when you say, okay, how much is your markup? Okay, it says it's an Islamic loan, but how much is your markup? And you say, oh, it comes to about 30%. 30%! You're asking these poor people to give you 30%? How evil? But let's think about it. When we give a loan to a Kriana store, we charge them a markup, a fee of about 2.5%. 2.5% for a month loan, right? And when you annualize that, it comes to like 30+%. Now, is that expensive? Is that unfair? Is that exploited? That's the question. And the general opinion I think you'll get is 30% is cruel to give a small struggling entrepreneur a loan at 30%. But let's look at this. When we give them 50,000 rupee loan at 2.5% for 1 month, what does he do with it? He or she will go out and buy supplies for their store, which they'll sell at a profit of 8%, 8 to 12%. And he will turn that money around in 1 week. Then you'll sell it and you'll go and buy more, and you'll turn that money around in 1 week. In the course of a month, he or she has made about 24% on the money that I charged 2.5% from. So you're still net profit above 20% of capital you never had. That you never had. So as a consequence, the Kriana stores are our best friends. They don't see us as evil, mean, or exploited. They love us because nobody else will give them the money to do this. And we take a portion of their profits, and it's a small percentage of what they make. So it makes sense to them. And especially if we can make these Islamic loans, then their conscience is also clear. So when you talk about markup rates, interest rates, and you say it's too much, remember, too much is relative to the use case for that. And it's also a function of the loan size, because there is capital, there are human beings, there are people who are making this happen, there are people doing credit scoring and building software and algorithms and going out and aggregating the community. There's actually a cost to that. So when you add that up, and again, I say you have to make it sustainable and scalable. When you talk about money and markup, I think the question is it equitable? Before you go and say, is it too much? And in order to analyze if it's equitable, it's a much more complicated analysis than just looking at this percentage number.
Okay. I'm not so clear about now, but I'll definitely read more about it to get much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have one question based on what you just said. So the return that you're saying they're going to be making, that's an assumption, right? That the
No, that's not an assumption, that's fact. So I'll explain how that works. So right now, Finja gives loans to the Kriana stores, the grocery stores on the corner street stores that I'm sure you go to near your house. Now those stores work in almost the identical way, right? They look the same. They've got a counter, they've got every day, they've got tea, they've got all of their items. Where do they buy it from? They buy it from suppliers. The largest one is Unilever. About 40% of all of the goods in that store are bought from one manufacturer. Then they have Coke, they have Pepsi, they have Nestle. So if you show me a Kriana store and tell me how much of one product they have, I can pretty accurately tell you how many of the other products are likely to have, because the demand in the market is almost identical. I can tell you how much margin Unilever gives to a distributor and how much margin the distributor gives to the store. So fairly accurately, I can tell you what kind of profit margin a store on average has across its goods. This is not opinion. This is documented fact. We have lots of data around this. We get data directly from the FMCGs, by the way. So when I say 8%, I'm not throwing a number out of thin air and assuming something. I'm giving you a fairly comprehensive financial analysis of how this works. And that's basically to illustrate to you how this, how we price it and why it makes sense and why we have a default rate of less than 1%. People pay us back. Why do they pay us back? Because they want that next loan because they've just made money and they want to make more money. And this is great. It's improving their livelihoods because you're a partner with them now. So the data I shared wasn't an assumption. I just wanted to clarify that.
Perfect. I just wanted to get that point clear. Amna, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, sure. So my question is basically about advertisement for Rozgar. How did you guys like first get their information, the people who you were going to send SMS to? Or did you just guys randomly get numbers, and how did you do all that? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, okay. So we started with using the data that we had collected to the Rozi Dost agents that were in the worker abadis, in the colonies. And that was our starting point because we gave them donations. Now we wanted to get them into jobs. So we sent them, SMSs. And we said, look, you got a donation through us, but would you like a job as well? Obviously, there was massive interest in jobs. And so they clicked it. They went to our web app. They signed up. So we were able to acquire them based on the field work that we had done previously. Then to grow that, we went out and did Urdu easy to understand ads on Facebook on their news feeds. And a surprisingly large number of them are on Facebook and browse their news feeds and understood our ads. So we had to iterate the ads a few times, how we talk to them, what we say. And we found a very large percentage of them, once we perfected our ad tech around this, were now onboarding themselves onto an Urdu voice activated web app. So that's how we acquired them. Now, the third way is actually opening up these little offices on the street corner, which is a thing we're experimenting with, but that's more expensive and takes a lot more operational overhead. And we're going to do it, but there's low-hanging fruit there as well.
I like how you say little work in little offices, and the work is not little at all. It's great work, and I just want to put that out there. My next question I'm going to take is from Iman, but Iman's having some trouble with her microphone. I'm just going to read out her question. So Iman's interested in understanding how looks at the gender divide. So whether most of the jobs that are being posted are designed for males, and is it accessible for looking for employment at Rozi to be able to easily have access to it?
Yeah, okay, so let's split this conversation into two parts. One, let's talk about women who are educated and have a degree, right? That's a different ballpark. And then let's talk about when you go back to Rozgar and talk about cooks and maids and other professions a woman might have at the bottom of the pyramid. That's also a different game. And it's very important to understand the social stratas and the social constraints around those. So when we talk about white collar jobs for women, Rosie's working on a number of projects with World Bank to find out how to increase women-friendly workplaces and what incentives are attractive in doing that. So there's a whole effort going on there. And I think when you look at the white collar job workplace, which people in this call would be in that group of people who go to an office. For women in Pakistan, there are a few challenges. And those challenges, the first and foremost is transportation. In Pakistan, it's much harder for a woman to move around than a man. And the reason is because a motorcycle you can buy for 40,000 rupees, which is affordable to a lot of people. And a car now, I think, what is it? It's like 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs. You can't afford a car unless you've got a lot of money. So now for a woman to get to the workplace, she can't ride a motorcycle because we frown upon a woman on a motorbike, which should not be the case. And I don't want to get started there because I'll hijack all of our time left on why we should encourage women to ride motorcycles, and it should be acceptable. So now the woman has to take a rickshaw, or a woman has to take a bus, and most likely the woman is taking an Uber or a Careem. So the cost of transportation, even if she takes a rickshaw, ends up being about 50% of her salary. And for a man, you're spending about 1,500 rupees on fuel. So, you know, it is less than 5% of your salary. So a woman is spending disproportionately more money and has much less flexibility with a transport that she needs to hail, or a rickshaw service that comes at 6 o'clock every day and she can't stay late, you know, than a man. That's the first issue. The second issue is that sending a woman into an office, your daughter, your sister, is stressful because we don't have work cultures that are women friendly. You're worried about harassment, and there isn't a formal kind of system to make the workplace friendly for, you know, a woman. Women are used to in the office having a chat request from some guy saying, "Oh, you look nice today," or, you know, whatever. And our organizations aren't culturally geared to understand that, hey, this is wrong, or this is okay. So for women, finding employment is often a function of which company you work for. Is this a good company for a woman? Is this okay? Is this okay? So the choices are restricted. For a guy, he can go and work for a crazy startup and crazy things in the field, no issue. So that's another issue. And the third is, once a woman gets married, the responsibilities for a woman in Pakistan are considerably more than for a man in Pakistan. Women are expecting, you know, okay, you're the wife, you have to cook, you have to make sure the house is in order. Kids, you have to take care of the kids. You have to do this, and you're a professional, and you have to do this. So the burden on a woman is much higher than a man. So now, the moment you start planning a family, which everybody has a right to do, all of a sudden the dynamics change for your career, because now you have to be at home, because very few employers have childcare support at the office. So it's very skewed. So when you talk about women-friendly workplaces, these are the things that need to be done. And these are the things that all of us need to do. We need to educate the corporate sector. We need to make sure the environments are friendly, that we have zero tolerance for any sort of harassment in the workplace, and educate the males in the workplace that this is harassment, because they don't know and they haven't grown up around these environments. So these are the challenge. And transportation apartheid, I call it, really. This is transportation apartheid. We need to fix this. We need to get every woman to think it is socially acceptable to ride a scooter or a motorcycle, like you see in Indonesia, like you see in Malaysia, like you see in India. We are very abnormal in that way. Now, when you come down to blue collar, also understand this online medium is very conducive for women to look for employment, because you don't have to leave your house. That whole transportation issue, cultural issue, a lot of that's alleviated in the first leg of this, because you have a digital platform, convenience of your home, where you can search and apply and explore. And that's been great, both on the white collar job front and the blue collar job front. But what challenges do you have on the blue collar front? Well, Rozgar requires ID card. We're trying to authenticate identity. We don't want scams and thefts and horrible things to happen on our platform. So we verify the identity of both the job seeker and the employer. And one of the challenges is many women don't have their own ID cards. One, they never made an ID card. But if they have made an ID card, and a lot of them have, maybe they don't have their ID card. Why? Because my husband has my ID card. My brother has my ID card. I don't have my own ID card. So a lot of men are custodians of ID cards for the female household members, because females just have not been independent or made independent. It's your right as a woman. You should have your own ID card in your purse, not with your husband or your father or your brother. If you need to do something, oh, I don't have my ID card. When my father comes home, I'm going to ask him, and then he's going to give me my ID card. Why? And, you know, on the same note, you know, just fundamental rights that having access and ownership of a smartphone. I spoke about this earlier, but we're finding cases where it's culturally frowned upon to give a woman a smartphone, you know, because men are fearful. Oh my God, what happens if she meets another man online? What's going to happen? So these are some definite cultural barriers, but as economic opportunity is created, it will trump all of this. And we've seen this globally. Once women become empowered and they become significant contributors to the financial well-being of the household, this will trump all of these conservative, backward thoughts. In the end, economics prevails. Households today, especially here in Pakistan, cannot survive with just one breadwinner. You need two. You need both engines. And more men are realizing that.
Thank you so much for answering that. I have another question from Hasnan, who's unable to open his mic at the moment, who's asking whether or not you've considered looking at Rozgar and collaborating with the government to find more people to come on the platform, or just engaging with SAs, for instance, to develop partnerships.
Yeah, we have looked at it. We've had conversations in the government. But what happens is things get very complicated very quickly, and it impedes execution. The government is super challenging. It's a private entity. We support you. A private entity makes a profit. A NAB case starts. Why did you get the ability to do this with the government over somebody else? And then politics start, various agendas, people, so it's difficult to do it. And it's a big overhead. And at some point it needs to be done, but it slows down execution dramatically. And right now we're after impact, we're after execution. We're not after headlines. So working with the government seems great and charming, but when you get close to the government, you realize that there are many complications in there, and you have to be at the right stage of your existence to be able to absorb that overhead and the complications that come with working with government. We'd love to, we'd be thrilled to, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't impede the impact that we're making and the scale and the speed at which we're executing.
Perfect. I think that's a very clear sort of direction in terms of the partnership. And I think we have taken 4 minutes of your time already over what we discussed, but we have one last question from Abdul Samud. Would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Abdul Samud, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Monis. So you mentioned you were speaking about the time when Rosie was in a turbulent time, when COVID-19 came up and a lot of businesses had to shut down. And then, Rosie was also struggling at the time. So my question to you was, just so that for a number of people that may be building businesses here, or for social entrepreneurs amongst us as well, how do you speak to resilience or building resilience in businesses, or, models, how do we build resilience into those kind of things that help us stand or withstand this kind of those kind of economic stress, or when issues like this or COVID-19 and next COVID-19 comes up?
This is such a good question, and resilience is one of those human qualities that is just beautiful. And I think the question is really, how do you bring out that resilience in human beings? And I think with Rosie, I'm just deeply grateful to the Rosie team. They were like heroes. They were champions. We were struggling for cash flow. We weren't able to pay salaries. People stuck together. They said, we're going to get through this together. And the sort of sacrifices and hard work that was put in by the Rosie team, it was so inspirational for me. I'd never seen that. And these are the same people I've known for many, many years. And I'm seeing this teamwork and collaborative spirit, and how people are sacrificing, realizing, hey, we don't have cash right now. Maybe I'm not going to be able to get a salary this month. It's okay. We're going to do this, and we're going to get ourselves out of it. So everybody bonded together, and there was a sense of camaraderie that we're all in it together. I, of course, stopped my salary. That's the first thing I did. But a lot of other people did too. And we found that a lot of people started to pay salaries of other people that we couldn't afford to pay. Employees are paying are contributing to help with cash flow of other employees. I didn't ask them to do this. Of course, we reimbursed everybody afterwards. But the fact is this happened. And I think when you create a common cause and a mission and everybody is an equal stakeholder and everybody gains from it, and not just you gain from it, you're helping other people gain from it. This human spirit comes out, and this is resilience. And that's what we need to strive for. We are all in this together. We're all in the same boat, you know?
I think that was such a wonderful last question for us to take, because it perfectly puts everything in perspective that although entrepreneurship is amazing and there's so much good that's being done, but resilience is the key in order for you to continue doing the work that you're doing. And with that, I want to, first of all, just put it out there that every time we hear it from you, there's so much energy, there's so much enthusiasm, and there's so much excitement to see where Pakistan is going. And it's our absolute pleasure to be able to learn from people who are taking Pakistan to different places. So thank you so much for that, for agreeing to join us for the second year.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. And it's you people who energize me. So I thank you for that.
All right. Thank you so much, Monis.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next year as well.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Take care.